would like to join others in thanking the government and the people of Japan and the city of Yokohama for their warm welcome. The World Bank is honored to be a co-organizer of the Ticad, and we welcome the theme of advancing Africa development through people, technology, and innovation. I would like to commend Prime Minister Abe for his visionary leadership in focusing on the private sector since Ticad 5, and for increasing the involvement of Japanese and African private actors since Ticad 6. We are meeting today in challenging times, with rising trade barriers, a build-up of government debt in many developing economies, and deeper than expected slowdowns in several major economies. These challenges extend to African countries. Economic growth, especially in resource-intensive countries, has been slowing over the last years. Many sub-Saharan African countries have heavy public debt burdens, and climate change is already taking a toll. These are some of the difficulties the government of the continent must overcome. But there are also tremendous opportunities. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement will make the region the largest free trade area in the world. Africa, we all know it, is rich in natural resources of all sorts. Digital technologies offer an unprecedented opportunity for the continent to leapfrog the traditional development path. And last but not least, Africa youth is perhaps its greatest resource. Taking advantage of these opportunities will create jobs. And we need jobs. To keep pace with the growing population, the continent needs about 20 million new jobs every year. Moreover, over 40% of Africa, 1.3 billion people, are under the age of 15. To paraphrase President Akufo-Addo of Ghana, African countries must act to ensure that this population constitutes a demographic dividend and not a demographic liability. At the Africa CEO Forum in Kigali this past March, President Kagame summed up in one word what must change. And this word is mindset. All of us, governments, development partners, and the private sector must change the way we think about the public and private sectors in economic growth and job creation. We need a new approach between public and private sectors to unlock Africa's potential. We need government to ensure sound macroeconomic management, debt transparency, and sustainability. We need legal and regulatory frameworks that provide an attractive and level playing field for companies. We need governments to foster private sector investments in quality infrastructure. On the other hand, we need a private sector who sees more the great opportunity than the possible risk to do business in Africa. Together, the public and the private sector can literally ignite the continent's economy. At the World Bank Group, we are embracing this change of mindset. We are increasing our support to African governments to diversify their economies and implement pro-business reforms. We have developed a new approach called the Cascade, by which we pursue private sector solutions where possible so that scarce public resources can be used where they are most needed. In fact, if you think about it, the World Bank Group is a de-risking machine. We de-risk countries through World Bank policy-based loan and public sector projects. And we de-risk private sector investment and projects directly through IFC financing and MIGA guarantees. And since IDA 18, with the introduction of $2.5 billion of private sector window, we have new instruments to de-risk and catalyze private sector investment in the world's poorest countries. Now, talking about IDA, as you know, IDA is part of the World Bank Group that helps the world's poorest countries, and it is one of the largest sources of concessional finance for the continent. About 2/3 of IDA resources go to Africa. The 19th replenishment of IDA is scheduled to be concluded in December. We are aiming for an ambitious amount, building on a successful meeting hosted by the Ethiopian government in Addis Ababa 2 months ago. I would like to call you for your support in achieving this goal. In closing, Ticad has a tradition of promoting important issues. Ticad 6 in Nairobi was instrumental in raising the profile of universal health coverage for Africa. We hope that Ticad 7 will help strengthen the partnership between the public sector and the private sector to accelerate Africa's development.
It was the 4th of October in 1993 when Ticad 1 took place, and it was indeed a very different era, and an era in which Japan's engagement with Africa and African nations took a new turn. As we look back over this period, it is also remarkable to reflect that Ticad 7 occurs in a very different world. There was no African Union. There was no African Continental Free Trade Agreement. There was indeed a perception of Africa as being marginal to global GDP, and very often Africa's economy is largely viewed as sources of natural resources, essentially an extractive relationship with the continent. It was also an era where a key topic of Ticad 7, science, technology, and innovation, would not have been associated with African nations, entrepreneurs, pioneers, and scientists, today often being also at the forefront of some of these innovations. So as we gather here in Yokohama, and Prime Minister Abe, under your leadership and under the generosity also of the people of Japan, I think the agenda that is emerging, the relationship between a nation such as Japan and the member states of the African Union is indeed a very different one. As head of the United Nations Development Programme, this is also something that clearly influences every day our thinking. Thinking about the future of development has been the focus of UNDP for well over 50 years, and for many of your countries, that relationship with UNDP indeed takes us back 50 years. But as we look forward, I think it is a sense of excitement with which that engagement with Africa, and that also the theme of this Ticad 7 takes on a very different meaning. Integrated, innovative solutions are today springing up across the continent. President Kenyatta is here. I had the privilege of spending 10 years of my life watching development across the nation of Kenya, but also across the continent. Indeed, my development training is really one of a journey of learning through Africa's own experience. That very well-known platform called M-Pesa is often associated with digital technology, maybe with a technology innovation, but indeed what actually prompted the development of this remarkable experiment in financial inclusion was precisely the vision at the time of government, of the central bank governor, to allow something to happen that would allow financial inclusion to change the way the financial system in Kenya would work. And I could go on with many examples. Renewable energy was nowhere on the agenda in Ticad 1 times. Today in Africa, again from Kenya with the largest wind farm, solar power in Morocco, in Egypt, President Al-Sisi. I remember our discussions 4 or 5 years ago. Today, you are one of the leaders in terms of implementing renewable energy. The challenge of climate change and of biodiversity is often viewed as something that has a problem when we talk about Africa. It is very unfortunate that these perceptions continue. Few people across the world know that African nations are amongst the leading nations in the world who have actually dedicated their land and territory to the conservation of biodiversity at higher percentages than virtually most countries in most other parts of the world. This is the story of development in 2019, from technology to natural resources to governance to integrated development. So, as head of UNDP, as part of the Secretary General's reform of the UN development system, and also as a long-standing partner to Japan, and Japan's support to UNDP and through UNDP to many of your countries, it is a proud moment to see a different agenda emerging. It is, as the Secretary General said, the dawn of a new era for Japan, but it is also the dawn of a new agenda for the future of development, a different kind of partnership, a partnership that, as the chairperson of the African Union Commission just spoke to, that is defined by Agenda 2063 and within our United Nations family as the Agenda 2030 of Sustainable Development.